Hi, I'm B from Nectar Mechanics, and welcome back to the latest episode of The Buzz. Today, I have joining me Kalani Ripley, Australian maker and Prusa. Well, works in Prusa.
I do work for Prusa. I'm the head of Asia Pacific, I think, or Australia, New Zealand. My title's a bit fluid.
Yeah, yeah. And so, can you tell people about yourself? Because I got to do a panel with you about 2 weeks now, and we got to have some chatting and stuff. I got to learn a bit about what you do, and it's fascinating. So for those that aren't familiar with you and your work, can you give us a brief sort of rundown?
Yeah, so I'll break it down into sort of two ways, I suppose. I have a day job, which is I work for Prusa Research as their Australian representative. I also work with the New Zealand team and some of the other guys as well. So that's sort of my day job. But then as well as that, I'm a maker by heart. I make a lot of stuff. I have this whole office dedicated to making things, and it's something that I really enjoy. I played a lot around with resins, which is ironic because Prusa sort of only makes one or two resin machines, and we're sort of known for FDM, and I have a lot of resin systems, but as well as that, I do a lot of FDM stuff as well, and I also do I do laser cutting. I do tons of making as well. Before I worked for Prusa, I ran an injection molding business
All
with
right.
45 odd staff, and that was sort of my passion. I sold that, and then that's ultimately like pretty much as I sold that, I got offered this job and we started working for Prusa. So it was sort of just the perfect transition because in that job I went from large scale manufacturing, millions and millions of parts a year to then using 3D printing or additive manufacturing in that workflow. So I've got sort of the a bit of industry experience in both making tens of thousands of parts with 3D printing or hundreds of thousands of parts with 3D printing, and then also making very detailed single parts. So that's a little bit about me, I suppose.
That's awesome. I had no idea you did the injection mold to start with.
Yeah.
So what I was going to ask what got you into 3D printing, but I think we need to start with that actually, because obviously that's a very different workflow to printing. Um, I so did you study for that? Was this just a hobby you fell into and fell in love with,
Yeah.
or?
Well, I suppose I'll start with printing because that's how I got into that. So I ran a 3D printing business, not so much FDM, more on the industrial side, so industrial SLA, industrial SLS, and that was sort of my first or second really job when I started
Um,
that company.
so what can you explain SLS and SLA for the viewers? I know what that means, but
Yes, yes.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so SLS is a powder-based system. So the beauty of SLS, and the most common ones are the ones by Formlabs. They have 60% of the market share for SLS. And what it is it's a powder. So think of like a bucket of sand. And when you use a laser to sinter or bind a bucket of sand together, they add another layer. And what that means is that when you take that bucket of sand with all the cured parts or sintered parts on the inside, you take the powder away, essentially it self supports itself. And you can also do stuff with materials like nylon, polypropylene, TPU, and you can do that with a lot of repeatability. And you can also do it with a lot of sort of industrial strength and pure nylons as well. So something like the HT90 here can do nylon, and it can do nylon really well, but it can't necessarily do it with the complexity of the parts that a SLS system can do. So, and then SLA is sort of most people are used to their desktop SLA system that has an LCD screen, whereas an industrial system actually flips it to the VATs on the bottom and the laser is on the top, and the parts build down into the VAT rather than up. So it's what's known as a top-down SLA, and the reason you do that is because get less part deformation, and you can also go bigger. So the largest system I had at one time was 800 by 800 by 600, and we were doing full car dashboards. It was really fun, but
Oh my
that was
word.
yeah, it was awesome. It was sick. I wish I still had that system. But so that system there, and how I got started was I built that company, and when I built that, I started 3D printing when I was about 10. I built my first printer. I built a Prusa. Actually, I built a Huxley, then I built a Prusa, and then I built a few other machines and went from there. But then when I got out of high school, I started working for a print farm. They had a ton of Ender threes, 85 Ender threes. So
I'm
don't
not
ever ask me to,
surprised.
yeah, don't ever ask me to work in that place again, because that was just, it was like 50% uptime. Everything was going wrong in that thing because they were just Ender threes, which is fine. But, that was great. But when I went from there to then I was like, all right, well, I did a couple months there and I was like, all right, let me start my own company. Sort of slogged it out for a couple of years. And then I ended up partnering with an injection molding company and ultimately buying them out. And when I bought them out, I had all this printing knowledge, but I didn't necessarily have the injection molding knowledge. So I partnered with a guy who was he's about 75. I think he's about 80 now, and he could build an injection molding mold in the back of his head. He's just that sort of guy. And he knows the same way you or I or somebody in the audience may be able to look at a 3D print and go, that's probably an extrusion issue, or that's a little bit of uncured resin. The same way we can look at that, he could do that for molding. It was just what he got. Yeah, it's what he got fixated on. So I ended up partnering with him, bought his percentage of the business out, and then we sort of went and found this hybrid approach of injection molding a large quantity of parts, yes, but also having a very large print farm because the biggest cost in the biggest hurdle in injection molding, at least to get a customer, right? I'm here to make money. Was to it was to get them a mold. So molds would start out at 7, 8,000 Australian dollars. So that was always, and they could go to hundreds of thousands very quickly. So
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
always the hardest part, was getting them to that point. And when I thought, well, okay, how do we solve this? Well, I'll buy a whole bunch of Prusas and I'll create a print farm. And that's how it started out, with that hybrid approach where we would print the first 3,000, 5,000 parts for them. And then eventually they would get to a mold. So it means somebody could come to us with one part and need one part, or they'd come to us with and they need 100,000 parts, and we could scale with them. And then ultimately, I got a really cool contract and I sold that company. And then I sort of vegged out for a couple months and ended up in Germany. And then I found myself here working for Prusa. And that's sort of like how I got, that was the life story, I suppose.
Wow, right. So it's a very, very like natural and direct progression of like everything led to another quite naturally.
Yes,
Right.
yeah. It was sort of, it was one of those things where you don't necessarily notice it at the time. Like the same way the way that I got my Prusa job was just by meeting my direct boss. I met him in the coffee line at Formnext. He had a Prusa t-shirt on. I had an Australian government because I was there with the Australian government. I had a Australian government shirt on, and I go, "Oh, Prusa, oh, the Australia. I've been to New Zealand. Oh, same thing, right?" I was like, "Yeah, pretty much." But and then that it was just sort of from there. So you don't necessarily know that progression, but it does. It does sort of. It always connects one thing after another. Even now, I still help a lot of injection molding companies. They'll give me a call because for some reason everyone has my number. I'll get a call at 4:30 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. Hey, how do we print this so it'll fit in our mold? I'm like, I don't know. Send me the file. So it's sort of one of those things where it's a blessing and a curse. But I fortunately just through a lot of yapping have figured out how to get connected with a lot of people and progress.
That's awesome. Having the that sort of the way it sort of branches off and everything. It's I think one of my favorite phrases. I'm probably going to get this slightly wrong, but it's luck is when hard work and opportunity meet. And it sounds like that sums up your life story quite well. Is that putting in all that hard work and meeting the right people. Like that's got to be awesome. Like
And passion too. I mean, that's the thing is, there's never a day there's times where I have to write a report or something where I'm like, wow, this is boring. But there's never a day where I'm like, this sucks. I'm never like that because at the end of the day, I'm printing a aerodynamic wing for my motorcycle here, and this is printing a part for my drone. So I get to do cool stuff every day, and that's what really is like the amount of times. I mean, that was why I got the SLA system when I started my printing business. Was I was like, I want to print big resin parts because I want them to be smooth, and that's how it happened. Is I thought, okay, let's find a way and find the application, and we did. And I had a great team behind me. At one point there in the injection molding business, we had 45, 50 staff.
Oh wow.
And that, yeah, it was pretty big. So like I had a great team. I didn't do it myself, but it was a great team, and we just sort of really focused on what's what's working for us, and where's the new thing that we can trial and sort of do new stuff, so that we always, because in Australia and New Zealand and the Western countries, is we're always going to be in there's always going to be a battle on who can make stuff either the cheapest, the quickest, or with the highest quality. We'll never do it the cheapest, so it has to be quicker or of higher quality generally, right? Or something that nobody else offers. So we try to find the balance between those. And when we could 3D print a mold and then injection mold into that, and then you'd have a prototype bit of plastic that you could say, okay, this is what our mold is going to be, rather than just having a 3D print of it. That was sort of the thing that we really focused on, and it was quite successful for us, and we got to do some really cool stuff. There's parts that I look at every single day when I'm driving to work that we've done on motorways and things that I look at, I'm going, I made that,
Oh
which
wow.
is a cool thing. Yeah, it's a cool
That's
thing to
insane.
say. Yeah, yeah.
What? Right. Are you able to? Obviously, I don't want to, ask questions that might be NDA at this point. I don't know, but like, is there any particular bits you worked on you can share at this point, or?
Um, I mean, we've done a lot of gym equipment. So there was a lot of gym equipment for Snap Fitness, a lot of like home gym equipment. We did a lot. We did a few product launches for a company called the Home Gym Guys or HG Performance. We did a bunch for boom gates for like the boom gates at parking lots.
Oh
A
yeah.
lot of clips and brackets and stuff. It was strange. So I think a lot of those are in Westfield now, because I've gone to a lot of Westfield shopping centers, and I've been like, I think I know that ASA bracket clip. I've seen that one before. That was in my factory 6 months ago. So like stuff where it's very benign, right? It doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm not sure if you've ever been in the car with a carpenter, and you're driving down their suburb, and they go, "I built that house. I built that house. I did the formwork on that house." It's sort of the same thing, but except my missus goes, "I don't care about the ASA flame retardant rating that you put on that plastic." And I go, "Please, like, just humor me here for a second, you know?" So I think that's sort of the main thing, is like, just when I'm always looking at all these different sort of things that I've done, is a lot of them, I've either forgotten about because it's just been a matter of getting things in and out of the door. So there's parts where I've gone, oh, I've forgotten about that completely. There's a Brisbane Airport's doing a renovation at the moment, and we did some air gap stuff to help for the steel not rust. And like, I'm not part of the business anymore, so I've it's just out of my brain. And I was flying out of Brisbane Airport 3 weeks ago, and I was looking at some form work on the renovations. I was like, I know that part. That was in my factory a year ago. I know that one. And that's cool. And now that I work for Prusa, it's also cool because I've there's a lot of farms that, like, I've go to a lot of drone shows, or I go to a lot of, I'm like, I know what that machine that was put on. I know that settings. I've seen that part, and that's another even cooler thing to look at.
So I wanted to ask, like, with all the 3D printing, clearly it's a huge part of your life, and you said you did your first printer at 10. How did you get introduced to printing? Because for me, I had the very generic sort of, I went to a maker fair, I saw a 3D printer, and I was like, whoa, what's that? That's cool. Got talking to the guy running it, and then spent probably the next 8 years desperately wanting one, but they're always too expensive until until that finally
I
came
know the
down to
feeling.
it.
I know the feeling. It's funny because my sort of introduction was actually because I was making Well, I wasn't making them. I was just disassembling Nerf blasters for something to do. And surprisingly enough, where I live on the Gold Coast of Queensland is about 45 minutes to an hour away from one of the world's most renowned Nerf clubs, which is the Brisbane Area Nerf Group, also known as Bang. And it's literally like, I didn't know this at the time, but it was like the like eminent engineering Nerf group where they were making custom blasters back in 2010, like before there was even, before Wenhow was a company. Like, there was always just this really cool innovation coming out of there. And so I went and played some Nerf when I was like probably like 10, 11, 12. And around that time, look, I could be saying I was doing my first printer at 10. It could have been 12. It was around that
It's
time. I
that
think roughly,
ballpark. It's that,
yeah,
yeah,
ballpark, right?
yeah,
Roughly the 2010s, or 2010s to north. But so that was sort of the introduction to 3D printing. That was when I used my first printer. And then I just mowed a whole bunch of lawns. I bought and sold a whole bunch of Nerf blasters. I learned to solder so I could make upgrade kits to then sell them to buy. And then I built a printer. It was very bad. It was made out of really terrible threaded rod from Bunnings, like from the hardware store. But it worked just enough to that I got like a print out of it. And that was sort of the formid like the part where I was like, wow, this is cool. And that's something that I've always sort of come back to with printing is that I've never really been a printing guy, as in that, I make the printer and that's my hobby. My printer is always something that's a tool to aid my hobby. And
Yeah, yeah.
it just happened so that I spent so much time fixing my printer, I didn't really have time to do other hobbies. And now that printers are so reliable, no matter what company you use, that they are now I'm actually able to use them as a tool. And that was sort of it was around 20 when the Mark 3S come out. That was or Mark 3. That was about the Mark 2, Mark 3 realm was sort of the first printer that I had where it was actually a tool that I could use, that I wasn't fixing nozzle jams, that I wasn't doing, just waiting on things to break on it. And that was when I was like, okay, now I can use it to. And at that time, I then switched to paintball because that's the natural progression. And so then I had done paintball, and then I made parts for my dad's caravan, and then it just kept going and kept going, and then all of a sudden you're making parts for planes and parts for, and it just keeps going, and it's just always another thing. And but when it comes to new technology developments, and I always found myself coming back to printing because it was something that was I knew the language of. And I've got rat rig machines, I've got Vorons, I've got all these, and I've built them because I've had a specific purpose for them at the time. And then subsequently, through the goal of me getting better at that printing, I end you end up just learning more about it. You learn about Clipper, you learn about Marlin, you learn about all this, and then you learn about how to make parts for FDM, you learn how to make parts for resin, you learn how to, and that's valuable knowledge that I didn't realize at the time because I'm a teenager. But that valuable knowledge is something that you transfer, and then you have skills in. And then fortunately, as you may be able to tell, I can also talk quite well. So I end up in a marketing department of a large company. So, I've got a really unique skill set that I suppose not many people have, but it was just from being a nerd over and over and over again through the orifices of 3D printing.
I think the stuff you're saying about 3D printers being a tool now, like not having to fix them constantly, it's something that I personally feel like I wish I had more experience with, because I definitely had it with my first printer. It's a MakerBot Replicator 2, and that whole process of the it constantly breaking down, having to fix it, I did get that. But I feel I'm a little bit younger, and so I came in a little bit later, and I feel spoilt for choice with printers nowadays, with the amount of, I don't think people realize just how quickly, because people like you were doing all this innovation and figuring out what works, what didn't, how to iterate, printers are not in the same space they were even 5 years ago, let alone 10. It's insane.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Because I think we're getting to a point where the industry is maturing quite quickly. There's not really an industry that I've seen in my lifetime. I'm young, right? I'm 23, but in my very short life, that has matured this quickly. You look at it from the standpoint of like a car. The car's really only got CarPlay in the last 5 years, and there's still cars you can buy now that don't have Apple CarPlay. There's few of them, but they're still maturing in their technology stack. Whereas now we have from 2020, 2021, there is a large amount of printers that are now you can buy, and out of the box they're ready to go. And that is something where the stack of maturing technology ready printers is crazy. There are companies like Prusa Research. They pay my bills, so quick plug.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there are companies that push the industry forward, and for granted for Bamboo as well, they have. But there's companies that push them forward and push the industry forward, and then there's companies that will sort of lag behind. I mean, the same thing with the way that you look at Volvo. Volvo pushes the safety standards of cars forward, and then everybody comes forward. The same way that Prusa introduced the neck extruder and the nozzle systems that we use, and that's the same thing. A lot of that, even, I mean, I think a lot of people forget that the Prusa XL was probably one of the first ready to market XY motion systems that was ready to go out of the box. And that's sort of one of the things where it's like, same with the Core One. Like the Core One is a great machine. Oh, you've got one, don't you? Have you got a Mark
I
IV?
do, yes.
You do.
I've got both. I've got a 4S and a Core One. I managed
Dude,
to
Shane hooked you up, man. Shane hooked you up.
I I feel so I'd seen because it was not long after it had been first announced, and I saw all these YouTubers that were clearly, had their connections already, been sent early test copies and stuff. And I was like, this might be a little bit cheeky. But I figured I'd just ask and see, and he was like, "Well, you've been polite, so sure,"
Nice,
which was
nice. And
insane. Yeah,
that's quite honestly one of the reasons that, I mean, that's one of the reasons that I really do enjoy working for Prusa, and one of the reasons that is because when it comes down to supporting maker community events, we kind as the marketing team, as a country manager team, we sort of have carte blanche to do what we want. I was at the Drone Nationals. I know I sold a ton of machines at that Drone Nationals, but I didn't have to write a report on it. I didn't really have to do too much. All I really had to say was like, we made our money back on what we invested in this event, and I know that we've supported a community. Like drones is a massive maker community, and it's the same as Nerf. It's the same as all these things. Is that I know for certain that if I said, hey, I gave, which I think I gave one or two machines away at that event, nobody's going to go, why'd you do that? I know that they're going to be like, well, you're supporting the community, we'll make it back in the long run. And that's something that fills me with a lot of pride. And there's obviously all these, there's a lot of people that will have reservations about whatever companies do, but because
yeah. So
ultimately we're companies, right?
that's something I actually wanted to say because like as a YouTuber, right? Like sponsorships is kind of one of the main ways that you kind of start to make it, right? Either they pay for your equipment or they pay your bills, right? That's one of the best ways to sort of make this work. And I remember when I was just starting out, like, I've got like 10 subscribers, right? And I'm like, I want to remain integral to my beliefs and stuff, right? With because you get all these people that get sponsored by whatever, Raid Shadow Legends is the one that's the meme's always about, right? And it's
I'm not
like,
gonna lie. If I
yeah,
was a YouTuber, I'd sell out immediately. You give me a Raid Shadow Legends sponsorship, I would make fun of the sponsorship while I'm doing it. I'm like, you can download it if you want, but they're paying me to tell you about it.
but
Uh,
that's what I was gonna say is when it
that's why
came
I'm not
to
a YouTuber.
Prusia, like I I I was sort of thinking about it when they initially started reaching out with the because for those that don't know, when I did my Soundwave 3D print last year, that was made possible by Prusia sending over a Mark IV, right? They reached out to me, they liked my content, and they gave me the equipment to do that, and I got to keep it. That was awesome. They did not tell me that I have to say anything nice. They did not even tell me that I had to say it was sponsored or anything. They literally were just facilitating my maker's journey. And that is the reason that I've been so dedicated to continue working with them because they. I know other printer companies are also lovely, and this isn't meant to be just the Prusa's amazing thing, but like the fact that you guys support makers, regardless of the channel size or whatever it is, like if you like the project and you like what they're doing, you support them, and that to me is like if I was running a company, that's how I'd want to do it, which is why I love getting to partner with you guys so often and get to hang out with you so much because yeah, not only do you make great kit, but you do great things with it. It's
Yeah,
wonderful.
I think it's an interesting one, right? Because that comes from the top. Like, I mean, I know, like the three brothers, Joe, Mikael, and Andre. If they see something cool, they're like, "Ah, we'll support it." Like, there's an open source project right now called FDM Monster. It's to link multiple instances of printers together. And I saw it the other day on GitHub, and I said, "Hey, I'll send you some open print tags for the NFC stuff." Um, and like, let's see what we can do. Like, I know we're working on our own thing internally, but there's no reason we can't just give you a bit of kit and help you out, right? And that's sort of the cool thing is we may not always be able to help out monetarily because we still have a lot of budgets that we have to apply to, but we
Absolutely,
can,
yeah.
yeah, we can always try to help out with these sort of things. Now, if I see 7 million emails in the info at prusa3d.com email after this, I will ignore 90% of them. But truthfully, I think it's something where those sort of small touch points. I mean, I'm not sure. I had a knee surgery the other day, and
Mm.
trust me, this has a relevant point. I'm currently walking around on a cane, and I thought, hey, I'm going to form next to the end of the week. I want something to put on my cane, so I went, all right, I'll give a free roll of filament away on the Reddit to anybody that will come up with the best idea, or to one person that comes up with the best idea. There was a guy who made there's so many good ideas. So, and that's something where it's like, yeah, like it's not a lot of money, but it's like that has a true cost. You know, that might be a 50, 60 US dollar cost plus whatever time it takes me to design it. And so there's a real cost to that, but it's negligible in the grand scheme of how do we give back to the community, right? And that's the same thing as with, I'm not sure if you know who Tommy is. He's our community manager.
I
Since
don't think I've
since
got
the
to meet him yet.
if
No,
you're
no.
on yeah if you're on the Reddit, you'll see him. But he's somebody that's there all the time. He's relentless. He's always replying to things, and like that sort of community engagement role is massive. And I think that it really comes down to the fact that everybody at Prusa, whether they're somebody working in the factory that doesn't know anything about printing, or somebody that is, literally in the greatest job role of their life, which is me, they they are all passionate one way or another about 3D printing. There's the head of HT90 sales. She started out 3D printing by making cookie cutters on a Mark II. That's how she started, and now she sells HT90s, and she's, I don't want to assume her age, but she's an older lady, and you would never think she is a 3D printing nerd, but man, is she. I sat there for 2 hours picking her brain about all these different types of ways that 3D printing she's done it, and that is up and down the culture at Prusa, and I'm sure it's at it. I mean, like if you look at other projects, I'm sure that's the same. I don't think Voron's a company, but it's the same sort of
Yeah,
aspect
yeah,
of
yeah.
Voron, and I'm sure there's others as well. Like that, it's that passion, that fire that is within the community, that is really what sort of pushes everyone forward. And I think that's something where it is separate from myself. I'm a nerd. I'm somebody that is passionate about 3D printing, but I really like the pushing the community forward is something that is really cool and integral. I mean, there's a reason I never bought a Formlabs SLS system. It was because it was closed source and it was very hard to work with. Whereas I sort of went for a different option, and that was sort of one of those things where it was like, you have to put your money where your mouth is. And
Yeah,
I think you even
yeah.
see that with someone like LTT, like Linus Tech Tips. They use our machines because they are. So I just had a delivery show up at the office. They use our machines because they believe in the open source side of it, and they believe in all that. And yes, we do hold some things back because we don't want it to get copied straight away, but we have a commitment that we'll release stuff, and so on and so forth. And we are as open as humanly possible in the current climate. And I think that is something that is, I'm really proud to say that I'm part of the project. And I'm really proud to say it. And with all the cool stuff that I've done, like back to like actually making things. I mean, like
Yeah,
the
so I wanted to
yes,
I wanted to ask you about that because
yeah,
so when we talked on the panel the other week, you were discussing an awful lot about like the resin side of things. Now I've not got to mess around with resin too much. I'm a bit scared of it. I'm going to be honest. Don't quite have the right filtration systems. But I think what I mainly want to ask is why resin over FDM? And I think given the fact that you were using it initially for like company stuff, I assume that plays a role.
yeah. So there's sort of a few reasons why you would go resin, right? So resin allows higher throughput if you're doing MSLA, so like a LCD, because of the way that it's set up. You can cure an entire layer at once. So you can get higher volumes on a fast resin system, desktop resin system, than some FDM systems. So that was sort of one reason. The other reason, obviously, surface quality. You're just going to get a better surface quality finish. And the
It's
other
amazing.
reason, yeah, and then the other reason again is that we were doing a lot of automotive parts, and nearly all those automotive parts have some sort of lens or tail light or whatever. And normally that would be cast, where we actually developed a high temperature resin that had transparency in it. Would put a dye in it, and then that would hold 85 degrees. If we clear coated it, it would have enough UV resistance, and that would then mean that we could have a tail light, or we could have a brake light, and that sort of thing. So that was really
Wow.
the pushing forward of that.
And that
And it was
resisted the
really
Australian sun? Like, because I know we
just enough,
can.
right? Like a lot of the stuff we were doing was custom one-off cars, so they were stored, appropriately. But if we were to do a clear coat, we had parts that were out there for 5 6 years, and they weren't having really any major issue.
That's
And that was
impressive.
yeah, it was really cool. It was really cool, and that was that. I mean, I funded it, but it wasn't my. That was it was Tom Marshall and Nick Cummins. They were the real engineers behind that sort of process, and myself as well. We were a team of three working on that one, and how to get that sort of tail light set up. And there's industrial systems where they'll do a clear resin that's a 355 NM resin, and then they'll sand it back, clear coat it, tint it, and that's how you get it. And you can do that as well, but we needed something that was going to be available on MSLA, because we wanted to have affordable resin costs without having to fill up an entire vat. So if you're doing an industrial SLA system that's 400 by 400 by 400 roughly, that resin, that's you're going to be outlaying 10 grand in resin just to fill it up, just to start printing on it. Yeah, so it's not necessarily the most cost effective thing for R&D to chop and change. So we needed something that would be MSLA. We needed something that would be high temp enough, a la like PETG, right? And then we needed something that would have some durability. If a rock hit it, it's not going to shatter. That was a really hard thing to do, but we got there in the end. And then ultimately, we printed stuff at 0.025 mil layer heights, and we had to pump in nitrogen into the chamber, so that way this is definitely not safe. I would not recommend it. We had all the PPE on all the time, but we had to pump nitrogen in to essentially create a vacuum. Then that vacuum would then remove any bubbles that would be in there. And then the few bubbles that we would have would only be on the surface layer, so we could try to sand them out. And then we would essentially have a lacquer and then a clear coat, and then the epoxy tint would give it the red or the amber color. And that was a really cool project, and that was something that we did a lot of. And by the end there, I mean, we were doing like I want to say 50, 60 taillights a month, and that was something that was just really cool to do. Or we did nearly every demo. And Tom and Nick, they still do them quite frequently now.
Wow. Right. Okay. So that's enabled you to get a lot higher, because that's the one thing that I struggle with my FDM prints, is that because I'm doing depending on the scale of the project depends on the detail. So like on my cosplays, like larger scales, FDM's the difference is kind of negligible for me because I'm probably going to sand it anyway, right?
Of
And you
course.
can get the power sanders and stuff. It's nice and big. But when I'm printing, I was printing like little action figure scale dudes, right? And
Mm,
that's not going to focus. Nah. Oh well. But like that is an FDM print that's been sanded, and because it's so tiny, it's awful getting the power tools on. And there's every so often I'm like, I could probably fit a resin printer here if I figured out how to get the extractions, because you really can. The fidelity is insane. Um, and it pretty much always has been, right? Like from the get-go, resin versus FDM, it's pretty much always had a higher precision, I think.
yeah, so
Um,
I mean, like resin or SLA, traditional stereolithography, was the original 3D printing technology back in the 70s and 80s. That was the first thing. That was 3D systems. That was what they did, and it was that sort of showed this massive leap forward. And then FDM came a couple years later, and it was SLA was this finicky, still kind of today is that finicky system that would give a great quality result, but may have to be sanded to get to that real final polished feel. You have to put mineral oil on it to remove like scratch marks, that sort of stuff. Whereas FDM was always sort of, yeah, like it's not the best quality, but you'll get a part and it'll be functional. And I think where we will see the industry go in the next few years is, or at least I hope, is that we will see a resin system that sort of combines the two. And that's less so about the printers themselves and more about the material science that's coming. And I think that's where we will see a lot of, at least on the sort of prosumer industrial side, which then obviously always trickles down to the hobbyist side. Like we will see, yeah, we will see a development. Like there's companies out there that are making millions and millions of parts a year on resin, And I think probably the largest producer of 3D printed parts is Invisalign, and they do that all on resin. Um,
Yes, yeah, I've got to actually yeah, I can't explain how it ended up happening, but I did end up getting to go and see some of their labs and stuff, like the actual
I'm so
print farm
jealous.
bits do it. It's insane. The resin machines they got,
Yeah,
not only are they big, but the details insane
yeah,
because they use that for dentures and things, and it's obviously they use like it's like a bio resin or something, like it's safe to put in your mouth obviously because you got to test it, and
yeah,
that's what fascinated me the most because that's honestly that's the only thing that deters me from resin at the moment is that I'm aware that with FDM plastic and those sort of printers and stuff, you could be a lot more. I mean, you should still be safe with it, and you should still be filtering it, but like it's a lot different to, getting raw resin on your hands, right? Like it's you can be a lot more lax with it. And so I'm always just sort of like I kind of want to just wait a couple more years and see what happens because I feel like there's enough, especially now with so many hobbyists getting into resin printing at this stage. Like I feel like there's got to be some sort of evolution, right?
yeah. I think it's going to be interesting because, like, I think the real champions of resin are Formlabs.
Mm.
They have really pushed the industry forward quite a lot, and I think that's interesting because they started off as a SLA system, and now with their latest system, they're back to MSLA, or they've now transitioned to MSLA, which is LCD. And I think that's what's interesting about that is that it is still a limiting factor, being that bottom up where it's pulling off a FEP, like all that sort of stuff is a limiting factor compared to a bottom down system, but you don't have to spend as much on resin. And that's where I think there will be a shift on. My very biased goal is that there'll be some sort of top down DLP or SLA system. I think DLP is a good hybrid for cost versus laser system, because
Can you
DLP
explain what
for
DLP is for?
yeah, I
Because
was
I'm
just about
actually
to,
not
yeah.
familiar with this. Yeah, yeah,
Okay, so DLP essentially is a projector. So they have a projector and it comes
yeah.
down. Now
Okay.
there is both bottom, so the projectors at the bottom going up, and then there's top down. There's both versions. A top down resin system it can essentially cure the same it'll cure a layer all at once, so you get the speed benefits. Because with an SLA system, not LCD but laser, a laser system has to draw the outlines of every part the same way an FDM machine would. So the more parts you have, the more complexity, the longer it takes to print. You can counteract that by adding more lasers, but more lasers, more expensive, more complexity. DLP is a good hybrid between top down, where you've got the speed advantage without adding more lasers. And I think that's where we'll see the industry kind of shift. And we still have already seen a little bit of it, more so from the Eastern manufacturers, where they are making a lot of cheap top-down DLP systems with sort of these really narrow 220 or 300 sort of cubed, but really deep. So we're talking 500-600 mil deep systems, and that's where you can
Wow.
sort of, yeah, you can chop and change. And the limiting factor with that is the wavelength of the resin. It's nearly always 405 nm or 385, which requires more power, so you get more deformation. Whereas I think if we get something in the 355s, 365, you get less deformation, you can get higher clarity, and you can get less you get sort of lower support contacts, because rather than having to peel apart off a FEP sheet and and have all the deformation that comes with it, you can just bring it down, have a recoat, a layer, new layer of resin, and cure on top of it. You can obviously have the recoated hit stuff, and that's where you have some more complexities. But that's where I foresee the resin systems going, and I think we see already with recoaters coming into the Formlabs, the Hagears, that sort of stuff, and you can also sort of get away with it with tilting vats. So they've got, we've got the SLX system at Prusa, where we have tilt back and forwards, which is pretty much the same as a recoder as well. So that's
Yeah.
where you can see. I think we'll see that sort of develop and eventually go into the future. And I think that also comes with, right now in current resin, without going to industrial 355 or 365 wavelength, you can also not really do true black parts without scratching. So when you
Yeah.
scratch the part, it comes white. And I think that's where we'll also see a development in the technology, the resins and stuff. Like, you can get some from Loctite and stuff, but they're $400-500 a bottle. So
Yeah.
that's where it'll become. I think that shift will come closer and closer, and I think that's where at least I see the resin side of stuff going is that we will get this like convergence of technology where the resin is has developed enough where there is there's less photo initiators so the parts are less brittle, there's more urethane so they're more durable, and then there's a level of sort of symbiosis where we can be able to really produce parts at mass there with an affordable cost, right? Because as makers, we always want to be able to produce stuff as cheap as possible while still having good quality. I think that's where we're seeing that will come in the next 5 years.
Yeah, and that's something I see. So this is possibly a bit of a silly analogy, but I was talking to one of my friends the other day about the new it's like the Apple Air, whatever it is. It's that new thin
Mm,
phone they've done, right? And my friend was saying it's like, why would anyone buy this, right? It's got a terrible battery life, it's got worse cameras, it's got whatever. And I was sort of having to explain, it's like, yes, but you see, you have to put all of that effort into this because it's the first that's proven that this technology can be that small, can be that efficient, can whatever. And then so this one's gonna suck, right? It's good enough, right? But what you're actually doing is paving the way for the nicer phones 5 years down the line. And I keep seeing that with 3D printing companies, right? So you're saying like, yeah, like the industrial side of things is where an awful lot of the money is, right, for these companies. That's where the focus is. But of course, if you do an innovation, eventually that trickles down, right? And so it's quite fun seeing almost the lag time getting a little bit shorter when realizing hobbyists are actually willing to pay for these advancements and stuff.
yeah,
Yeah,
and I
it's
think that
quite
was
cool.
something that we saw with the multicolor. Sort of people
Yeah,
have
yeah.
really now been willing to sort of spend on that multicolor side of things, and and I think the next sort of progression to that will be multi-material. Obviously, the XL we have that it's a great machine, it works well, but the XL with multi-material
I wanna
is
mess with what that does.
yeah, it's gonna be. I mean, yeah. I think the multi material side of things is where it's going to be really interesting to see where that develops. Because for me, I've used industrial FDM systems, and the biggest thing is always support removal. Being able to put parts into a tank of support removal fluid and have them come out, and you don't have to touch them. That is something that I think we will start to see as a really big development, and I think that's where we see things like Index. Obviously, we will have Index available on the Core One and the Core One L, and whatever future machines, I'm sure we'll probably have them on there too. But
What's
those
uh
sort
what's
of
index? I've managed to miss that somehow. This sounds
oh, sorry, so
interesting.
Index is it'll have let me be careful with my words here.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
multi
yeah.
yeah, it's essentially a tool changer. It's by Bondtech, and we'll be integrating it onto our machines Q1 2026. Well, actually next week at Formnext we'll be displaying it, and so will Bondtech, and it's essentially a multicolor system, but presumably because it changes tools as a cold side tool change rather than having an entire hot end assembly, it has just the filament path. Presumably, my thought at least, this isn't Prusa, this is just me, that could allow as well a multi-material setup. And I've seen some of the Bond Tech Index stuff working not on our machines but on other machines with because I actually haven't seen any on our machines. They keep me because they know I'll leak it on podcasts like this. They will. I know that we've seen a lot, like I've seen them do multi-material stuff, and I think that's where we'll see. Obviously, we've seen PTG as interface layers with PLA. We've seen
What was it?
uh,
PLA, PVA supports. I didn't even know PVA filament was a thing till people started like dunking them in the water and it just dissolves. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, PVA is an interesting material. Like there's also BBOH. I've got a roll of that there as well, which is a little bit quicker dissolving. I think that's where we'll also see PVA supports becoming a lot more accessible. That all comes down to the extrusion system. The way that industrial systems get that around that is they use an industrial cleaning fluid, and what that means is it's very toxic and not good at all. So it just essentially dissolves. Yeah, it dissolves the whole of the material core away, and it uses only materials that resist it. So if you've got a material that will dissolve in a cleaning fluid, but ASA definitely doesn't dissolve in it. Well, hey, you can print in polycarb ASA nylon, and your support material is everything else. And that's how a lot of industrial
Right.
systems do it. So I think that's where we will see something where if there's going to be industrial systems that will use that, maybe PVA has sort of some technological developments on PVA and BBOH and other water solubles, or even just a special cleaning fluid that is a lot more accessible. There was HIPS for a while there with limonene, which was okay, but limonene is very expensive. So we didn't see it adopted nearly as much. And that's where I think we'll see in the next. I know we're going to have index next week. We'll be able to display
I'm
index, and
excited to
that's
see that.
yeah, it's going to
Whoa.
be really cool because I know what I can say, but I don't know. Like I know there's limitations, so that's going to be really cool. Where we're going to be displaying index and how many of the sort of progressions that'll come, right? Because that's going to be a much more accessible multicolor, like, and we're talking more than four material sort of system here on a Core One or a Core One L, and that's something that will probably get ripped off at some point. But it's that new innovation that we'll see where people will start to do really cool things. I mean, like look at what HueForge has done with like full graphic displays. That's awesome, and that's
Yeah.
from an open project with closed source hardware. So imagine when there's an open project with like it's gonna be really really cool. And I'm super excited to see that. That's where I think it's gonna be a where we're gonna see the progression on FDM side as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see where FDM stuff goes because I've seen I definitely feel like FDM machines getting so accessible. Like I think typically that's what the makerspaces get, right? You know, the fact that it's not as toxic, it's a bit easier for makerspace people to actually look after it and get hobbyists in. I'm definitely excited to see what the next step is because I feel like we've gotten past the we're not having to fix it every 5 minutes now, right? So
Yeah,
now that we don't have to spend our time fixing it, we can now spend our time improving it. And it's I mean it's already getting insane. Like I think the main limiting we've got with print speeds now is like the what cooling time on the filaments. Like the motors are as
it's the
fast as they
actual
can
it's
be.
the main thing is actually just how much material you can push through a nozzle. Like that's why a lot of the speedboat benches and stuff is all done with ASA because it's got a great volumetric flow rate.
The
So
speeders are insane.
that's yeah, so that's what I mean. That's the largest thing I would think. There's some projects that are doing like multi-material, like two spools of the same material into one nozzle, and like that's really cool. And I don't necessarily know if we'll see that in the next 5 years. Maybe that's 10, 20 years or 10, 15 years away where we'll see that implemented. I think there's going to be I think now there's sort of this new sort of not race, but new sort of competition in the slightly larger build volume. If we're
Yes.
talking, I think there's a new sort of industry standard around the 300 by 300 range, and I think that's where we'll see a lot of the competition sort of start to really push towards. And I like 300 by 300. I think it's a great size, and I think that's where we'll start to see a lot of printers starting to be the average. Obviously, we'll have the Core One, which can be upgraded from Mark IV. And when we have the Core 1S or the Core 2, like you'll be able to upgrade, right? So that's sort of the reason the Core 1 is the size it is so that we never leave our customers behind. But I think as we have the Core 1L as a new platform, that is something where we'll also see that sort of new industry standard of the size. Because for better or worse, there's two major players in the 3D printing space now, and we both of us have sort of decided on that 300-ish range as a new platform moving forward. And I think that's where we'll see some really cool things. I mean, it's sort of a nice Goldilocks zone. Very rarely use the full build volume on an Excel, um, unless you absolutely need it.
Yeah, no, the only time I have ever been maxing out my build plates is when I've been doing the Iron Man cosplay, because obviously, like,
Mm.
those are this is human sized, right? Some big chunks. So I think that's the only time I've ever been like, oh, could it just be a little bit bigger? But when I do my Transformer prints and stuff, it's kind of the perfect size.
It
I know
is.
you're not supposed to with FDM machines, but I lay them out like a resin one, where it's like all the same parts of the same color are done in like a batch so I don't have to keep doing filament swaps. And you're able to fit them all out, all spaced nicely, and they all fit with room to spare. Like it's quite a nice middle ground, I think, for like yeah hobbyists and that sort of side of things. Yeah, and then when it comes to like doing the bigger prints, like Prusa's slicer software doing the cuts and adding the tabs and stuff.
Mm.
And I never had to mess around with it before doing this project. When I finally did, I was like, this is really nice. Like it's actually really
Yeah.
good at doing all the correct, like adding the in what's it? It's like they got the clips and stuff. You can change
Yeah,
and
the DAOs and
customize it.
things. To
Yeah,
be fair, I very rarely touch that sort of stuff. I like I sort of am very fortunate that I have an XL, I have a Core One, and I have even larger machines. I've got a Rat Rig 500 as well. So that
cool.
when I do need big parts, I usually just go on and put it on that. But when I have had to split parts on, it's been pretty easy. And I I know enough CAD software that I can usually just try to find a way in the CAD, but being able to do it in the slicer is a pretty nice to
Yeah,
have as well.
that's what I was gonna say. It's like no, normally when I've done prints, yeah, doing it in the CAD is how I'm used to. Like because what was it? It was Samwave that I did. He was like a boombox size figure,
Yeah.
and like if you know how big your printer is, you can make sure, especially because he's lots of individual pieces. You could be like, all right, here's the limit of how big my biggest part can be, which is quite useful. But yeah, not with Iron Man being lots of concave shapes and weird stuff, like not necessarily wanting to have inbuilt tabs and things like it. Even if I don't add that in the slicer, right? The fact that it can get the clean cuts and fix any of the topology errors that can arise, that's quite nice. Yeah. So this is actually going to transition quite nicely because I wanted to ask, like, so you obviously work at Prusa. How did that come to be, and what's it like in your role? And obviously, I understand
Sure.
there's some questions I can't ask, so feel free to say no. But I just want to
You're
know
right.
what that story is because this is fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, so it's funny because my direct boss, Andre Droboda, who he's actually he used to own a, or maybe still does, I don't know the relation there, but he owns a Counter Strike and League of Legends team called Entropic, and he now works at Prusa, and he was working for Prusa for about 5 6 days when I went to Form next last year, and I was sitting there. He had the Prusa t-shirt on, and I was like, I know Prusa, like I think at the time I had 20 odd Mark IVs. I said, I have your machines, yada, yada, yada. He goes, oh, wow, cool, cool, cool. He's like, don't ask me anything about it. I only just started. And I was like, oh, okay, no worries. And then eventually we started getting in contact. And I had said, like, as a customer of Prusa, I said, look, these are all the issues I have with them. Um, and here's how I think I could fix it and how you could fix it. And that was sort of the starting point of a couple months discussion of like, hey, do you want to start implementing these things? And I was like, sure. And then, like, obviously, I'm in the marketing department, so I deal with I work with a lot of the creators and things as well in the Australian region, in the Americas, in New Zealand, in that sort of English speaking realm. So I deal a lot with the influencers, but a lot of my side is also developing, like, I suppose the business term is developing the market, but growing Prusa in Australia and New Zealand and so on and so forth. So majority of my role is going to events, talking about Prusa, going to lots of business meetings and telling them why they should absolutely buy our machines and all the talking points. But really the big push for me and what I do day by day is working with a lot of the creators, and working with a lot of the influencers. But then as well as that, working on the making sure that the business side of things are happy. If there's resellers and things that are using our machines, or there's like there's people that use a few hundred of our machines to make parts for drone companies or to make parts for caravans or so on and so forth, making sure they're happy, and then also bringing logistics costs down and all that sort of side of things as well. So I always say that it's about 33% marketing, 33% development, and then about 33% power of will. And I think that's sort of the benefit of like the role that I'm in is that it's a choose your own adventure book with some very loose guidelines of like, please do this. And that's where I really find that, where I can do things like this, where we're doing an interview right now talking about 3D printing and stuff, where this is it may not be a cost benefit analysis on what the ROI and that sort of stuff, right? It's not a report writing, but it's something that is still engaging with the community. And you'll probably see me on Reddit all the time. I'm talking to people, like I'm on Discords. I'm talking to them because, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm younger in the community. I know a lot of these people. Like I've got a lot of the people that I see in the community are my friends, and being able to support them is awesome. So that's sort of like the the skinny of what I do, I suppose. And there's sort of the broader aspect of like, how do we make Prusa more accessible in Australia and New Zealand being so far away? And that's sort of where we come down from the day to day to the what does it look like, in the end of next year or Q1 or Q2 or Q3, and what does that look like as a broader scheme? And that's where sort of the longer term planning comes in and what my longer term role is. And that's where that's what I enjoy doing when it's like nighttime and I just have to sit there and go, okay, how do I figure this out? What do I do? And fortunately, I've got a really cool team in sort of all these different departments that we work with. So that's a lot of it. And then I also get to play around with printers all day, which is pretty cool.
I was gonna say that's gonna be the dream job, right? Like going from being, and I think again going back to like the way Prusa has been as a content creator working alongside them, right? Is I've done some other sponsorship bits and stuff, and the biggest difference I found is that Prusa seems to only hire 3D printing nerds or people who used to do a bunch of making or still do a bunch of the making now that they're in that role. And so it means that you've got this nice blend of like, okay, I'm talking to someone who knows the business side or whatever. But when I'm asking, hey, can I get the black filament because I'm gonna sand it, and I need it to see it gray and stuff, they don't question that because they go, oh yeah, I've done that. Yeah, yeah, no, that obviously right. And it's really nice to have that. I think having that community engagement and having those people, you're not faking it, right? Like this is very genuine and it shows. And it's wonderful to
Well, that's
see.
good. That's good because I think for myself, it's good feedback for me because I often think that when I'm at these events and stuff, obviously I have to toe the company line, right? You have to make sure that you're still saying all the right words, but when you when the right words are generally in the right direction, there'll always be people that'll say, like, oh, why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? Blah blah blah. And it's sort of as long as we know that we're generally in the right direction, I think that's good. And there's always going to be times where we make missteps and things, and I think it just comes back to how you deal with it. And I think that's a lot of credit to the owners of the company, like the three brothers, but also to a lot of the marketing team. Like I know you deal with Shane a lot. Now you're dealing a
Yeah,
bit more
yeah.
with me, and I think Shane in the marketing department, he's sort of the panoptic, all-seeing eye. Like he's a maker through and through. And that sort of that trickles down. And and to be fair, I don't actually really know what Shane does. I know he handles the content creation, but he sort of is just in his own world, and if he sees something cool, he supports it, and that's sort of the philosophy that I've taken on. And I've only been working here for about a year and a bit, and those continuation of what everyone else has done to support the community, and now we're sort of got this free reign to like, if you like it and it might be risky, like you might not make the money back on what the cost of freight and materials and everything will be, but if you think there's a longer term vision there, give it a shot. At the end of the day, like if you win some, you lose some, and it's sort of that freedom is where I think if you don't really get in other companies, and that's where
No, you
I've
don't.
really
And
enjoyed it.
I see so many. Is it Nate from the internet who's doing like the giant castle build at the moment, the big Lego
Yeah,
castle,
he's
and
got
it's like
so much Prussian. I've never like that guy. I see it come through the company. I'm like, bro, how do you use that much? And then you see, like, oh, that's what he's doing. Yeah, it's insane.
I don't not to discredit other companies, and I'm sure there are others that people will tell me in the comments, but I don't see companies other than Prusa doing this stuff as often as they do as well. And one of my favorite things I've seen, specifically with that project with Nate, it was an Instagram reel or something, where Prusa got together a bunch of people that they've worked with to sort of ask questions for Nate and stuff and get it, and it was really cool seeing that it's like Prusa is helping bring those people together as well as lifting them up. And that's yeah. I I'm very proud to call myself among those people. It's very cool.
I'm glad. I think it's one of those things as well where for me, I always like the community environment. That's why I love Formnext. Formnext is the largest, for those that don't know, it's the largest 3D printing conference in the world. It's four gigantic halls of just like 3D printing debauchery. It's amazing. You'll love it. It's 5 days. It's awesome. Would highly recommend if you ever get the chance to go. And I think the biggest thing about that event is that it's the vibe of the sharing of knowledge that is there, that is a second to none. I had an event recently, or not me, but I attended an event recently in Australia, which is the Additive Manufacturing Center for Research in something. The AMCRC is the name of it, and it was the closest I've ever gotten to being in Australia and having that same vibe of, wow, this is like the sharing and of knowledge, and these guys are doing stuff on MJF, these guys are doing stuff, and it was just that free floating of ideas. And I think that's what, it's a passion project of mine to try and build something out like that. And I know that if I pitch something like that, I've got a pretty high success rate of doing it, and that's where I want to see, like, in the next few years. And we talked about this on the charity stream the other day. It was like, in the next few years, I really hope that that is something that we can bring to Australia. Is whether that is a maker fair or a maker event, or like a community backed event where just rock up and and show what you're doing. And I think that's where
Yeah.
it's going to be really cool.
I again, one of the things that drew me to 3D printing, and I wonder if you feel the same, is that because it's so, I mean, 3D printing's been around. You said, like, there's been bits of 3D printing since the 70s, right? But like the actual hobbyists building printers doing this sort of stuff, it's only really been in the past 10, 15 years that it kind of got big, that it started to snowball, right? And because of that, there's always been makers teaching makers. When you go to do carpentry or something, it's been around for 100 years. There is the do's, there's the don'ts. 3D printing is very much a have a go and see what sticks, right? Oh, this worked for me, that might work for you stuff. And I think that's why I love 3D printing so much outside of the actual work I've been able to do, is that out of all the communities I've been a part of, because, Transformers communities, all these fandoms and stuff, right? Out of all of them, 3D printing's been the one where it's the most collaborative, and like everybody, yeah, you'll get those guys who tell you what you're doing is wrong and that you need to buy a new whatever, but you get some people a lot of the time genuinely trying to help. This is what worked for me. Have you tried X, Y, or Z? And I think that's also why it's gotten so big so quick, because everybody's sharing everything. And again, it's just really cool to see, because I don't feel like we've been able to have anything similar. When it's come to, the only thing I think of is maybe like video game development, because that's been relatively recent. But even then, that's like 30, 40 years at this point. Um,
Yeah, exactly right. And I think credit to the drone community, it's a bit like that as well. Is
yeah,
the
yeah,
drone
yeah.
communities is like they're like, hey, like, this is what I like, especially FPV drones is like, this is what I've done. I'm working with a few drone influencers on some unique materials at the moment, and it's like there's people that are now that from one video that had 10,000 views, I'm now getting texts like, "Hey, how'd you do that?" Like, what? And that's sort of, it's really the only two places where I've seen such cool sort of innovation happen, and free floating innovation. And I mean, yes, obviously some of our systems and things are not released yet to open source, but we do commit to releasing them. And I think that's where you see like the Prusa Slicer, our firmware, everything is given away, and you can say, hey, like nearly every, I can't think of a competitor's software that isn't built on ours, like a major competitor. And that's where you start to see, okay, like this is gonna, this is what has happened, is we've had this massive growth, a because of the community, and because there's been a level of give back at any point. And I think as we see things starting to close up, we're going to have this sort of maturity, and sort of people that are not willing to really sort of give away a lot. And I think that's where we will start to see this sort of fight to see what prevails. And I think that's where, at least from our side, like from Prusha and from my side personally, I think we're really trying to still push the open, open, and then like develop the technology, try to make your money back on it, and then open it up to the community. And I think that's the necessity of the best of a bad situation. I think that's where we're really seeing that push forward. Um, and the closed loop source things like there's some industrial companies out there that sort of essentially just patent troll companies now. They just have patents on various odd crazy things, and they don't necessarily even use the technology. And I think that's where there's a hybrid approach there, and it's going to be really cool to see where it is in the next 10 years. And I think that some of the new developments are going to be really, really cool. And that's why I'm so excited to go to Formex. Like, I jump on a plane in like 3 days. I'm so excited to go, because it's like every year it's going to be, yeah. it's gonna be so good. And I get to go. I'm gonna spend some time in the Prusa factory afterwards, and I think that's gonna be probably my favorite part of the trip, I'd say.
So I do. We've been talking for nearly just over an hour now. So I do want to start
Oh
wrapping
well.
up soon because I know you're a busy man, got a lot to do. But I do just want to ask before we wrap up. Outside of the future of printing and the future of Persian and stuff, what is the future looking like for you? Like, what is your hopes for? Not to sound too much like a business interview, but like, where do you see yourself in 5 years, sort of thing, right? Like, what's
Yeah,
your
that's a good
goals?
question. Well, I mean, so I've got a charity as well. So I help out. Like I'm on the board of a charity, so I hope to mentor a few thousand
What
kids
don't you
through high
do?
school.
I
Yeah, so we hopefully will be mentoring a few thousand kids through high school, and into post secondary pathways. So I hope that that will really be flying. I mean, like we've that's got a team of 14 now, and the team over there are doing a great job. So that'll be amazing to see. I hope for myself that like I'll be able to do the same things that I'm doing now. I'll be able to play with all the fun printing technology that I have been for the last 5 years, and I'll be able to continue doing that. And I do think that I'm going to be a company lifer. There's a person in the events team that they say that Prusa took their youth because they started there when they were 18 and now they're like 30 something. And I think I'll be that guy. I think I'll be that. I'm a company man through and through, and I think I'll be here till the ships sail because I think it's such an amazing thing to see. And I also hope that through my work with Prusa, through my work with all the other things that I've sort of tried to develop and help out with, I think that there will be a greater acceptance of additive manufacturing at scale, and 3D printing at scale. I think there's nothing more apparent than obviously back to the plug. Prusa has the largest print farm in the world. We do the largest FDM production parts in the world, and I think that that is where we are now seeing such a large acceptance of that. And I think the continuous growing of that is something that I will consider a personal win if we can get to the point where we are beating injection molding and we are getting to that point. I think that's going to be amazing. And yeah, for myself, for personally, I think working on that, working on my charity, working on developing really cool, innovative sort of printing uh, sort of scenarios and case studies. What has worked, what hasn't. Developing that new sort of stuff is going to be really really cool. And obviously, I am a nerd, but I am also in the marketing department, right? So I am not somebody that sits there on the daily to and tests multimeters and amperage, but I have I like to play around with the new tools to find weird and wonderful ways to work on that sort of stuff. So I think that is really where I will continue to see myself, and probably making more parts for my motorbike.
that's amazing. That's I like I say, what don't you do? The charity work and everything, and all of the like. That's insane. I had no idea. I think there is. I saw someone talking about this more about like being a YouTuber, right? And like a lot of being a job, doing YouTube as a job. An awful lot of that is that you want to grow, right? The message is always you want to grow. You want to get more subscribers. You want to get more views. You want to get more whatever. And the fact that your answer is just, I want to keep doing what I'm doing plus a few extra bits is kind of that sounds a lot healthier to me. Being like it sounds like you're already there, and I love that. I can definitely, yeah, family company, that sort of stuff. I can definitely understand that. I look forward to hopefully working with you in the future and stuff. Like it's yeah, even just
Definitely.
getting to hang out and chat like this has been amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the time. Thank you for having me. I think it's one of those things where just my last little tidbit is that it's like the endless, relentless shift for continuing growth is when you're sort of on the come up, right?
Yeah.
When you're going and you're going and you're going. When you get to a point where things are going all right, you may not necessarily go, oh, I need to keep pushing forward. There's people like that. I'm not one of those people. I definitely will continue to want things to grow, but not. I'm not at the endless growth side of things, right? I want stable growth. I want something where yeah, my numbers go up. That's cool. I hit my KPIs. I hit my targets. I hit, my charity's working well. I do all these different things, and they're all humming along correctly. But it's just about now. I know I'm young, but it's at the point where hopefully the give back is greater than the take.
That's that's wonderful. That's genuinely wonderful. I love that. I think I'm already. You've only worked there for like, what'd you say, a year and a bit at Prusa, right?
Yeah, I don't actually know. Maybe a little less. Yeah, something like that.
I'm already seeing your impact on the community, and it's lovely. And yeah, like I said, I'm definitely looking forward to working with you more. And feel free to chat with me about 3D models and bits. I'm gonna post you about some resin bits once I eventually get one of those machines. Need to set up the workshop so it's got a better filtration. But once you've done that, you can definitely see the benefits for the sort of work I'm doing. Um, Now, all I want to ask is, where can people find you online after, if they want to get in touch with you, whether they're a creator or even if they just want to talk to a professional on this side of stuff, where's best to find you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the easiest way is probably just go info@prusa3d.com and then just say attention Kalani Ripley, or like, just mention that you want to talk to the Australian guy. There's not many of us in the company. So usually it'll get filtered to me. May take me a week or two to get back to you because there's probably about 5 layers of filtration before it gets to me. But send an email to info@prusa3d.com if you want to get in contact with me. Go buy a machine. Go make something cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, hopefully, this won't be the last time we'll see you on the show. We'll see.
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much. Farewell.
Cheers.